Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the KeenGamer podcast. I'm your host, Tristan. I'm with Anyka. Anyka, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
Doing well. I'm ready to talk about some Ratchet and Clank as it came out, about 2, 3 weeks ago now at this point or something like that. And
Oh,
I don't know, time flies. It feels like it
I
just came
know.
out. But we decided to do a spoiler cast. We're kind of waiting for someone else to beat it, and you just beat it. Before we get really into the meat of Rift Apart, though, what's your history on the franchise, just so listeners can kind of get a feel for where you're coming from?
There's not much history. I remember when I was younger, I had a PS3 at my dad's place that we would use only for like videos like Netflix and stuff, video streaming, DVD, Blu-ray. But then some of the games he got for me, I think one of them was Ratchet. I have no memory of what it was. So like I was familiar with what kind of game it was, but I don't even think I got close to finishing it. So
Mm.
when this came out, I really was just like, oh wow, this is a cool game, but I don't think I'm gonna get it. And then I kind of saw all the feedback and praise about it, and then I kind of realized, okay, this might actually be up my alley, and I'm glad I did invest in it because it was really fun.
Yeah, for me, it was. I've had some time with the franchise. As you know, I'm a huge Insomniac fan, but so I had a PlayStation 2 like when that came out, and I played Up Your Arsenal, which was the third game, and then I
Didn't
dabbled.
even know that they had names like that. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. I played a little bit the second game called Going Commando, uh, and then I don't think I touched the first one. I don't think so. And then I think I played the fourth game, which I'm blanking on its name right now. Uh, but then because I didn't have a PlayStation 3, I ended up just not playing any other one. Deadlocked is the one I was thinking of. I don't think it's the
Mm.
fourth one, but it was sometime after that. It was, I don't know, maybe the fourth,
I
fifth
didn't
game.
actually realize they made so many.
Oh my god, it's insane. Like I can't even keep up with how many they have. Um, as they have like spin-offs like on the PSP and PSV Vita.
Right.
Yeah, they have so many. So I just didn't really catch up on them because I didn't have a PlayStation 3. And then when I got a PS4 and they did like, I don't know what you call the 2016 game, like it's a retelling, it's a reboot, it's
Mm.
a reimagining. You could throw in any of the terms really at it. So that was kind of my comeback into it, was playing that, which was basically a retelling of the first game. Some different mechanics there to kind of refine the gameplay and like kind of like a reimagining of the first game because it's being told like from like a third source essentially. And I really loved it. And then this came out and I was like, oh my god, like they're on a roll with Spider-Man and stuff like that, and it just like looks so beautiful and all this stuff. And like I got the PS5. I was like, all right, I had to get a PS5. Like this is the game that made me go, I need to get a PS5 because I can't handle the idea of not playing this game when it comes out. And thankfully I was able to, and I actually wrote the KeenGamer review so people can check that out, get my thoughts on it and whatnot. I'd get maybe something a little bit different of perspective, since just writing a reviews is going to be different from chit chatting on a podcast. So with Drift Apart, as this is like your first real, experience with Ratchet and Clank, though, what'd you think, like just overall?
It was just so much fun. I would think about it all day and I'd be like, "Oh, I can't wait to play more Ratchet." And it wasn't I don't even know how to I'll put it simply. Anyone who has a PS5 should definitely play this. This is like on the top list of things you have to, because not only was it like extremely fun, I was surprised that the story was interesting, that I even cared.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my god, I think this is the best looking game I've ever looked at in my life, especially because I went on performance RT, so it was both 60 FPS and it looked good. I was like swearing out loud. That's how good it looked. I
Yeah,
was just shocked.
I also played performance ray tracing. I assume you played Miles Morales, correct?
Yes.
So did you play performance ray tracing on that one too?
I thought there was only one or the other, and I remember switching between them and just kind of I liked both. I just kind of experimented with both. Was
Mm.
there a mush of the two?
Yeah, there was performance, fidelity,
God
and
damn
performance
it.
ray tracing. I don't know how
I
you
should
missed
have
that.
done that. Damn it. Okay.
Yeah, but that's what I did. Like I want it to be as pretty as possible. I don't know what the resolution is for Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart when it comes to performance ray
Hmm.
tracing. It's definitely not 1080. I think it's definitely higher than that. Like maybe it's 1440. I could be wrong. I don't really have the eye for that, but it definitely looked better. But with the ray tracing, it's game changing. But also having 60 FPS, like I can't. I'm a PC gamer. I can't do 30 FPS anymore. I literally can't do it. That
I
like
even noticed a visible difference between 30 and 60 FPS, and I would show someone else, like in my family, and they'd be like, "What are you talking about? I don't see any difference." I'm like, "But it's so much smoother. Look at this."
Yeah. When I played Miles Morales and the remaster of Spider-Man, I played them back to back when I got the PS5. That was like one of the first things I did outside to play Demon Souls, of course. But when I
Mm.
did that, I would just switch it to fidelity just to take the screenshots. But those few seconds of fidelity mode and seeing Spider-Man swing around in 30 FPS, I was like, "Oh, this is so bad. This
Yeah.
is awful." And it's to me, it's unplayable because I'm used to
Now we're so
doing,
used to it. Yeah.
yeah, I'm used to doing like way more than 60 FPS. I'm used to doing 144 FPS on my
Oh, wow.
PC. So that's the average I get on there. So, but it's not jarring for me to go 60. I feel like some PC gamers are so snobby and go 60 FPS. It's so sluggish. And I'm like, no, it's
Yeah.
not.
No.
It's a huge difference. But to me that is the ultimate way to play, especially since the ray tracing in this game, it's so impressive. It is
Oh, yeah.
so incredible. I don't know if you knew this, but the when you the currency of the game, the bolts, each individual one is ray traced actually.
I
So if
think
you
I saw like a screenshot on Twitter and someone had a really high def photo, and I was, wow.
Yeah, because if you use photo mode and then you zoom in, you can see all the reflections and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up doing that. I don't remember if I posted that picture on Twitter or if I posted that on, if that was in my review. I can't remember. But yeah, I was just like I was floored with it though overall. Like I had high expectations because it's Insomniac. Like to me, they're like a top tier studio, especially with the Spider-Man games and like the last Ratchet and Clank, the reboot, retelling, whatever it is, and then Sunset Overdrive. Just like they've been on such a roll, I was like, all right, this has to be incredible. And just looking at like the gameplay footage and all the press for it, I'm just like, how could this not be amazing? And guess what? It was amazing. It was just
Mm-hmm.
absolutely incredible of like a fun adventure that not only looked great but played great, and I think it really utilizes the PlayStation technology so well. Like the haptic feedback on the controller was just amazing. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't believe it. I think it's I don't know if it's necessarily the best use of the haptic feedback and the adaptive triggers of the DualSense, but it's up there. It's still rivaling against Returnal, which I still think might top it a little bit in terms of
Oh,
the
definitely.
DualSense utilization. But man, what a beast though! It was really really impressive.
It was interesting because you could tell like each gun, each weapon felt different on the controller as well.
Yeah, it made it. It was a huge difference. Just like how you would just pull like halfway pull the trigger and it would
Yeah.
fire differently and stuff like that, or just the rumble in itself was just so like just what you feel in your hands. You're like, I don't know this is possible. And there's certain things, even with other games, like I literally don't understand what's happening. Like I get a sensation in my hands when playing like Demon Souls or Eternal, and I'm like, what is technically happening here? Because I
Mm.
can't figure this out at all. And it's just like it's mind blowing. Like that controller, it's not a gimmick. It really is like the next step in gaming, honestly,
Oh,
when
yeah.
when it comes to playing on a controller. And I would love to see, because Xbox sorta has like adaptive triggers, but not nearly like as advanced. And I would love to see them rival the DualSense or something like this,
Mm.
because it's I don't want to play on a controller that's not the DualSense anymore. You know, I
Oh, of
still do.
course, yeah.
I have an Xbox controller right here, just because
Hmm.
playing an Xbox controller on PC is better than a PlayStation controller. It's just better optimized
Hmm.
for it, and they don't even have the all the fancy stuff with the DualSense on PC. And anyways, as of right now, I think they're trying to make that a thing. Um, but let's talk about like the story and characters and really get like into the meat of this game. And just so people don't know, I guess a brief overview you could say of the story is essentially Ratchet and Clank. They're at some celebration parade thing. They get attacked, and they defeat the bad guys. Clank's like, "Hey, buddy, here's this Dimensionator that I made, which is basically a gun that goes into other dimensions so they can find other long boxes, which is Ratchet's race or species, whatever you want to say. And you know, he's never met one before, and so that would be a huge deal to him if he could find his ancestors or his family or someone, anyone like him. And Dr. Nefarious, their iconic bad guy, comes in, goes, I want that, and then they fight, and next thing, one thing leads to another, and the Dimensionator gets broken and everything gets ripped apart. They're going through different dimensions and all this stuff. The two of them get separated, and Clank meets up with Rivet, a Lombax in another dimension who has her own Nefarious, Emperor Nefarious, and he basically just rules over everything and whatnot. And the three of them basically team up and defeat both Nefariouses and try and also repair the rifts that are torn apart and stuff like that, so everyone can go back to their own homes and settle there. But what do you think, like, story wise? Because I know you mentioned the writing, but like, what do you think of, like, you know, the twists and turns and all that stuff that was kind of happening?
I actually thought it was gripping, and it was, especially during, I guess I can't talk about spoilers, but there was one part at the near the end that
Oh,
was
you can talk about
actually like
spoilers.
a
It's
good.
Spoilercast.
Oh, true. Okay, spoiler warning out of there. Okay,
Spoilers from this point onward. Let's just say that. Yeah.
we'll say that. So when, like, who is it? Kit? Is that the robot?
Yeah.
When you find out that, like, that Kit was the reason that Rivet's arm is gone, like, I was actually like, oh wow, this is an interesting dynamic, and I really like Kit as like a, she just wants to do good, but she's afraid of herself, and I think each character was actually interesting, and they all had their kind of arc in itself in the game, which I was glad about. And I just really enjoyed the whole thing. And I don't know how long it took for me to finish it, but honestly, I could have done for more like story missions and stuff, because I feel like when we were exploring each planet, like, I finished the missions pretty easy, and I kind of felt like I wanted more, but I get what they were going for, and I think they nailed it anyway.
Yeah. It's a pretty tight experience, and those games are never like that long. I was satisfied with the length, but I definitely see where you're coming from. But I think what is surprising though is like how mature it is, like in
Oh
terms of
yeah.
like what you said with Kit. It's like that is like a heavy thing to deal with, and they handled it like very maturely, like because it's such a cartoony, stylish game that is for like all ages. Like you would think they might dumb it down, you know, and like, you know, like Kit would explain to Rivet like, "Hey, I'm so sorry. Like I was built for this way, and I'm not this person anymore." Or robot, I should say, but you know, I'm not like this anymore. And they would get along, and they would bury the hatchet. It was like, but it was just like, no, this is something that's deeply hurt. You know, Rivet, obviously she lost an arm, but emotionally, you know, she hasn't recovered from it, and her thinking this newfound friend is just a friend, and it turns out the person who took her arm and did this to her, like it was a lot for her to take in, and she needed space, and like she was a little bit cold to her, and like obviously they eventually kind of wrapped it up and kind of became friends again, but it was like, no, I need, like, hey, I don't forgive you, I'm pissed, and it was like that's very real. Like you don't like no one should feel like you need to forgive someone who, if someone hurts you and they apologize, you don't have to be obligated to accept that apology, you know, and because of however you feel. And the game was like, hey, we're gonna tackle this way, you know. And I thought that was it was really powerful. And like there's other moments in the game that like are like, wow, this is hitting way harder than I was expecting, you know? And even just telling like a story about like with Rivet, like, cause she's, you know, cause without the arm, sure, she has a cool robotic arm, which was honestly, it was cool as hell. It's super cool. But, you know, she's disabled, and her dealing with that in terms of just life, but also her identity and being more than her disability is really, really powerful. And I was like, damn, this is like going way harder than expected. And I appreciate that Insomniac's doing that, you know?
I think the story is easily digested for any audience. I feel like a kid could play this game and still be as interested as an adult. It is not a kiddish cartoon. It is, of course, like cartoony, but I wouldn't even call it like a child's game.
No.
This is like any adult can get into the actual story without like just feeling like, oh, I'm buying this for the game. I don't care about, I'm going to skip all the cutscenes. No, this is actually really important to the story.
Yeah, it really serves the story and the characters. And it's one of those things where it's like, this is what good writing looks like, where you can go, okay, we're not making like a rated mature game, you know, like that's going to be super violent or anything like that. We're going to try and open the gate for anyone to play this. But we want to tackle these themes. How do we tackle it? And it's just like, just do it, you know, in a very real and honest way. And that's what it comes down to. And video game writing has improved greatly over the years, but it still has a long way to go. Like I play some game, like newer games, and I'm like really impressed with the writing, like this, for example. But then I play some games and I feel like I stepped back 15 years. Like, what was that game that came out? It was like third person shooter that came out earlier this year. I'm totally.
Oh, I love some examples of some bad
Outriders. That was the game.
Outriders. Okay.
Did you play that game at all?
No, but I think I saw it on my timeline.
Really bad level design that just felt all the same, like a very generic cover shooter with some decent looter shooter elements. But the writing and story was just, it was so melodramatic. It was so poorly written. It just didn't feel like just, I don't know, it just felt like a 16-year-old wrote it, honestly. And it's just like, how can I make this exciting and engaging and stuff like that? And it's like with no like deeper thought. And it's just like, I don't know, it just felt like a game from 10, 15 years ago, honestly, in terms of the way it was written and the acting and all that stuff. But this is like, it felt like it's still pushing video games forward, you know, rather than taking a few steps back. I think it's kind of surprising too, because not that Insomniac's games had bad writing before. Like I really love Sunset Overdrive, which, did you play that?
No, I didn't, but I know the fans of it are big fans of it.
Big time. It's one of my favorite games. I think it's one of the best Insomniac games out there. But it's not mature in the way we're talking about, where it's opening up to really major issues or anything like that. It's a flat out comedic game. Like it does not take itself seriously. It is very, I would say it's comparable to like maybe Deadpool, because there's like fourth wall breaking. It's very raunchy and stuff like that, you know? And it was very funny and it was very well written. And I felt like it was a step forward in terms of making a game very comedic and very fun, but nothing very deep. And so I was very surprised when the next game they came out with was Spider-Man. I was like, wow, this is heavy. And spoilers for Spider-Man, but when Aunt May dies, you're like, oh my
I was shocked.
God.
Yeah.
Like that's the way they're ending that game. Especially like there's like suicide bombers. Like there was a flat out terrorist attack, you know, in that game. You're like, geez, this is heavy. And Ratchet and Clank, I'm glad they didn't shy away from that, because Ratchet and Clank traditionally a little bit more kid friendly, a little bit, you know, not so much so like other game franchises. It's not Nintendo, but it's still like, you know, light, you know. But I was like, wow, like they really hammered it down of delivering something with more substance. And I think that's something I think the video game industry needs to tell more stories like, you know, and you don't have to get like super deep or anything like that. But I do think like you need just to push it a little bit, just to be a little bit more mature, because I think the industry is still growing up, you know, and there's times where it's like, oh wow, this feels like real adults made this. And there's other times where it's like they're really catering to teenagers who are going to play this, you know, and not try and challenge players, you know. And I think that's what's great about this game is this challenges adult players, teenage players, kid players, whoever, to really look at these things like, hey, you know, like if you're disabled, you're more than that, you know, that's not just you, you know, and or like things about like just friendship and whatnot and stuff like that. It's like it was really moving, and I was like, man, this hits really heavy. I think the only issue in terms of the writing, it was at times, only a couple times, maybe like 2 or 3 times, it got a little too cheesy, a little bit. Like the very ending when they're all together and they're kind of yucking it up, and then the camera pans up and then you see like the fireworks, that's their faces, you know. I was like, all right, that was a really cheesy note to end on, and then it went to credits, you know. But I get it, like it does fit, you know, with like the kind of cartoony, almost like it's like a Pixar, you know, like movie almost, you know. And so I kind of get it, but at the same time, I'm just not the biggest fan of like the cheesy kind of kiddie type stuff or whatever. And so those moments, I was like, they could have.
But they still had a good enough balance throughout the whole entire thing. If you look at the big picture.
It was just like a couple times where I was like, I'm not crazy about that line. You know, it's just like a line or two, but overall, like I wasn't like soured by it or anything like that, you know. And but how would you think about how they did with two Nefariouses? Because most of the game is Dr. Nefarious, the main villain, but then they like late game they introduced Emperor Nefarious. Like, how did you think they executed that?
I thought it was great, and I liked the different kind of boss battles where you get like the giant robot, and then you get to Emperor, and that was a pretty tough boss fight. And I don't know if I died at all in this game. Like I definitely did a couple times, but overall I kind of liked how you get this even more evil Nefarious, and then you get like how he's not treating the usual Nefarious right.
Yeah.
And then he's like, okay, I'm sorry. Can you save me this one time? And he's like, no, screw you.
Yeah.
And I forget what happens to Dr. Nefarious in the end. Do you remember?
They basically they knock him on his ass and
okay, good.
You know, he's done for and whatnot. But
yeah. Until next game.
Yeah, because he's like the villain in like not all but most of the games. At least I feel like, at least from what I have played. But I liked it a lot. I thought it was a really like the different dimensions and having characters that kind of mirror the original characters but in different ways, you know. And it worked, and it was like I felt like they just could have given Emperor Nefarious a little bit more time in the game. I feel like they really kind of pushed him a little bit too far into late game, and I would like to have seen a little bit more of him because we hear so much about him. But let me really see like what the difference is of like him ruling and stuff like that. I think they could have hammered that a little bit better because you hear a lot about like what he's like and all this stuff, but I feel like they could have at least shown him do a couple things and actually show like what is life like when he's Emperor, you know?
Yeah.
But I did think their dynamic between the two Nefariouses was excellent. Like I don't know what I expected. I guess I didn't really expect anything because I didn't know what to think of Emperor Nefarious, but seeing him kind of like Dr. Nefarious comes in and, you know, he's like, he takes charge and he's just like, oh yeah, this is great. You know, I'm in the big C and, you know, he's making all the, you know, he's pulling all the strings and stuff like that. Then Emperor Nefarious, he's like, I think they explained it like he was off somewhere doing some mission, doing something awful. I assume conquering some world or doing something like that. But he comes back, he goes, dude, what are you doing? Like, this is my house, you know? And he kind of puts him down a step, you know, and And
Yeah, you think like Dr. Nefarious is like evil, but then you see Emperor Nefarious and you're like, wow, you're a real downgrade to him.
yeah, and it's like I kind of like because Doctor Nefarious has always been kind of like a goofy villain, you know, like he does bad stuff, but he's like at times he's very sensible. Like he just says like some stuff that's like oddly progressive and or like some like or just some stuff that's just very sensible, and you go, oh, that's not what I expect a
Yeah.
an evil robot to say or whatever. But I liked how Emperor Nefarious was legit bad, you know, like he wasn't as goofy or anything like that, and like I could take him a little bit more seriously, and I thought that dynamic really helped kind of balance it out, because if they had him too similar to Nocturne Nefarious, then I think it'd just be too silly just to have these two kind of goofy villains, you know. But
And you could tell the difference even in their voice because I'm pretty sure, I guess it's the same voice actor.
no, it's different actors.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you could definitely tell them. But even like Dr. Nefarious's voice is very maniacal and evil, you know. But then Emperor is like, he got a bit of an accent and it's a bit lower pitched, and you tell this guy's more serious. And usually I don't like mustache twisting, I'm evil just because I want to be villains. But I think like the Nefarious, both of them, they're aware of that. So like they write them to be like that. So I actually like I didn't mind it. Like I thought some of the parts where Dr. Nefarious was explaining his plan and stuff, it was pretty funny. And I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
think
glad you're
it's more of like
passionate about
kind of
this.
tongue in cheek, kind of making fun of those classic type of archetypes for
Yeah.
villains. And yeah, I loved that. And I think the highlight for me though was Rivet. I instantly knew, like from seeing her in just trailers and such, I was gonna like Rivet. But I didn't know how different she was as a character to Ratchet, you know? And honestly, we played way more of her than I was expecting. I thought it was going to be like
Oh yeah.
25% of the game was going to be her, and the rest of it was with Ratchet. And also, I thought Ratchet and Clank were going to be together like way sooner and such. But it was like no, it was like way late in the game, and they really committed to that, and I respected that. So then you had to have Ratchet build this relationship with Kit, and then you had to have Clank build this relationship with Rivet, and you got to really know Rivet a lot more. Because I was worried because that was a big thing that they were advertising is, look, there's a new Lombax, you know,
Yeah.
like this is crazy. This is the first time you ever seen another Lombax outside of Ratchet. It's a big deal. And I go, okay, but how long are we really going to see her? And it's like, no, she's like half the game. Maybe, I think, maybe it's just me, but I feel like we played her more than Ratchet, I think.
It felt like you did, especially because you finish off most of the big villains with her as well.
Yeah, that's right.
I really like, it's kind of also your choice because I really like how you could switch back between them whenever you like, it would, depending on what planet you go, and they would go, oh, I wonder what Ratchet is up to. And like you feel like you're connected to both of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you really did feel like connected, and they really did felt like, I understand why they made them feel basically this, they were basically the same character in terms of gameplay, but just because it's basic game design, it makes a lot of sense. But, and I will get to that later when we talk about gameplay. But I really fell in love with her character. I thought she had so much depth to her, and Jennifer Hale is just like one of the best voice actors around. You know, the Commander Shepard and Mass Effect and a million other stuff. Like she's in way more. Like I knew she was in a lot of games, but I just did not realize how many games. Because I saw like a post that was like a bunch of different characters she's played, and there was some I'm like, oh, I did not know she played that character, and I played that game. You know,
Yeah.
but like I just thought she stole the show, like in terms of her performance, but also like the way they wrote that character to really give her respect, I think, and really give her something to do and give her an actual arc. Like you said, every character has an arc in this game, and that's what's incredible. Because so many times, even with movies and TV shows, not everyone gets an arc, you know. But this, it's like, hey, here's 4 main characters, and go, okay, they're probably not going to give every single person an arc because that's usually how it goes. But then it's like, no, this is Ratchet's journey. You know, he wants to reunite with Clank. He also would like to get this Dimensionator, not only fix everything, but also he really does want to meet another Lombax. Like that is something he's always wanted. Is something that he was given the opportunity to, but was taken away from him. So he wants to do that. You know, Kit has her issues that we talked about before. You know, Clank wants to reunite with Ratchet and fix everything. But Rivet really has like, you know, she's on like, you know, she's basically like an outlaw, you know, in the sense that she's you know, going against Emperor Nefarious. You know, she's leading this resistance, and she also has like these insecurities and these like, you know, personal issues about like her arm. Like there's multiple moments in the game where she looks at it and she kind of has this look of like being like, man, it's like that this is still hard for me to deal with, you know, because I assume it must have happened. I don't know when it must have happened in terms of like the timing of everything, you know, because I assume to build a robot arm takes a little bit of time, but at the same time, it's fresh enough of a wound where she's still like dealing with that. And I thought her journey of dealing with that was like really great and really powerful. And I just thought she was also in terms of lighter moments, very delightful. You know, I just love her.
I like how she was spunky and she would fight back. And, you know, in times when she's angry, she sometimes may not make the right decisions, but at the same time, she's nice and she cares. And I like that about her character. And another thing, I thought the kind of other arc with Ratchet, how he was almost like nervous. He was like, well, I don't want to go back to my people. He was unsure about it at the beginning, because I think he was just so happy to be with his best friend for the rest of his life. And then kind of throughout, he starts to get less afraid about it. And I thought that arc was unique as well.
Yeah, it's like he had a little bit of anxiety about it. It's like, well, I don't know what it's going to be like, you know, like, are they going to accept me? Are we going to get along? Like, are they, you know, friendly Lombaxes? Or are they going to be mean? You know, like there's like, you know, it's troubling, you know, but like, and seeing his reaction to when he first sees Rivet, because he kind of like slips and falls, and you know, it's like it's a whole little thing. But then he looks and he sees Clank on the back of another Lombax, and he goes, "Wait, what's happening here?" You know, and like that moment was so impactful, because it's like he went his whole life being like, "Well, I'm just never gonna see another Lombax," and that was it. You know, like that's his life, that's his world, and he kind of came to terms with that. But now that he's confronted with this idea that, hey, there's another Lombax, and he goes, oh, wait a minute, I kind of came to terms with this years ago, because he had to, but now it's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to toss that out the window. You know, it's like, I'm going to be able to meet another Lombax, you know, and a little bit, you know, all the mixed emotions you're going to get about that in terms of a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of excitement, you know, and I thought they portrayed that just so well. And the meeting for the first time in that battle arena place or whatever, and it was just like, man, it was so powerful, and it felt really real and genuine. You know, it's being like kind of like an awkward but nice moment, you know, of being like, oh, hey, you're a Lombax, I am too, you know.
Yeah, and when they like talk at the same time, because they are like, they said like counterparts, so they're almost the same, maybe Lombax on the inside, but they're very different. They're not the same, and you can tell. I think the only difference I wish was kind of there. I kind of wish their armor and their weapons were different, but you know.
Yeah, I also wish they felt different in terms of playing them, but like, yeah, like even there's a point, because there's like Clank has his like own levels where you do like those puzzle things or whatever.
Oh yeah,
and we'll get to that later, but. You know, because he's asked by Gary, who's like the part of this, or you know, this group of people who kind of run, I don't know, like essentially like a gateway into other dimensions, and are like, hey, we kind of run the show here, and we can help you get a new dimensionator to fix everything and whatnot, and they're a huge part of it, everything. And I also love how he had this like super long, like elaborate title and like all this stuff. He goes, but you can call me Gary, and it's like, all right, dude. It's just like, it was very like on brand with Ratchet and Clank to have like something like kind of going a little far into the sci-fi realm, but then dial it back just enough just to be like, oh no, you can just call him Gary. We know you're not going to remember this, you know?
Yeah.
But he was like, so, or like, you know, like, what do they like? You know, like, is she like Ratchet? And he goes, no, they're totally different. And he kind of was going over their personality traits being different, you know? And, of course they were kind of spelling it out there just for anyone to, you know, maybe didn't catch it or whatever, but it was cool. Just him being like, seeing Clank's thoughts on it, you know, and him being like, no, I like her. She's different, you know, but they have some similar, you know, personality traits and stuff like that, you know, or even with Kit, you know, like she's very intelligent like Clank, but you know, her confidence isn't there. She's kind of like a little bit like him in the early games where it's just like initially just trying to like kind of get adjusted to everything. Maybe doesn't really like change too much, you know, and just kind of likes things the way they are, and like, and not just, and she really kind of battled that throughout too, with like her being like, I'm gonna stand back, you know, and things were getting really tough, you know, and Ratchet basically had to sit her down and be like, no, like we need to do this, you know, like we can't just sit aside and let this happen, you know, like we need to do something, you know, you're gonna regret not doing anything. And I just felt like that was just another moment of the game being really mature and being like, hey, if you want to see like change in something really bad, you need to do something. You can't just sit on your hands about it, you know? And seeing her come around to that, and also coming to terms of like of her identity too, just being like, I'm made to kill. I'm made for destruction, you know, like, and not wanting to do that. And like when she first transforms and she was kind of hesitant, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what's the deal? And then, you know, she destroys everything. You're like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And then she turns to Ratchet and go, wait, what? You know, like, am I have to fight Kit, you know? And she, you know, turns back to normal and goes, I'm so sorry, and stuff like that. And like, you know, it's like, that was just another part of like a character battling their identity. And it's just like, wow, it's really impactful and really mature of them to do. And again, not a thing I expected them to do at all.
No, I thought that was done very well.
Yeah, and I'm just so impressed. Like they have such good writers at Insomniac.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? I'm blanking because I looked up the woman who, because it was two women who wrote this game, and I think one of them was like one of them was contracted, who worked on a bunch of Marvel comics, actually a bunch of Captain Marvel comics, I think it was, if I remember correctly. The other one has worked at Insomniac, but has done other stuff outside of it. And it's just like, I thought that was the right choice too, especially when it comes to, you know, two of the lead characters are women, and the game traditionally have been a little bit more male centered, with Ratchet and Clank and Captain Quark and Nefarious and like some of these other side characters we got to know too. So it was traditionally more male driven, and even the other characters you would meet throughout the game are mostly men. So it's like, all right, we're gonna have like two of the four leading characters are women, and it's like them having women to write the game and stuff like that. That was right. But since they were new to writing Ratchet and Clank, I didn't feel Ratchet and Clank were different, because I know you don't have much experience with the games. But if you, I really recommend checking out the 2016 game. I was really good, and you get a little bit more context to some things about characters and stuff like that. I think it will kind of change your perception a little bit of Ratchet and Clank and Rift Apart when you play that game. And it's just like, wow, I can't tell the difference here. Like, it really does feel like they understood the characters, because when you bring in someone new to write something, especially for characters who've been around for like, I don't know, like, how long have they been around? Like, the games have been around for like early 2000s.
PS2
like,
days.
Yeah, so it's like closing in at 20 years. Maybe it is 20 years. I can't remember. It's like 2001, 2002, somewhere in there. So it's like 19 to 20 years. And then just to take these characters and be like, wow, I couldn't tell. Like, I legit, like, when I was like, because when I write my reviews, I kind of do it a little bit like a movie review, where I talk really in depth about the actors and the writers. Like, I want to know that stuff. And so I was like, okay, who wrote this game? I really did a lot of research on those two women. I can't remember off the top of my head everything, but because it's been weeks now. But it was one of those things where I was like, oh wow, they didn't write any of the previous games. They haven't, and I was like, I was really impressed by that. That was like something that really took me back a moment.
Did the one girl work on Spider-Man at all? If she's been with Insomniac, or she just never contributed?
I can't remember. It's been a
No,
while
but
since.
they definitely chose the right people.
Yeah, I can't remember because it was the Marvel comic book writer, and then it was someone else who's worked at Insomniac. So I just
Right.
can't remember exactly in terms of the writers. I'm looking it up right now to try and find it, but regardless, I thought they were stellar.
Yeah.
As I talked about earlier, it's just so hard to find good writers just in video games. It's so hard. It's just so bad. But
then it's a good thing they got a comic book writer, because I guess I could kind of see that Ratchet and Clank could definitely be a comic book type of thing.
yeah, absolutely. I thought it was like, I would honestly, that sounds really cool if they made a comic.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Insomniac, if you're listening to this, you should definitely
Ratchet, Clank, and Rivet.
Yeah.
And Kit, please.
Okay, so I looked them up just so people can get their actual names. So I was just going, look, are these women writers, or whatever. So Lauren Mee, she was previously at Telltale Games, actually.
That's good.
Yeah, so even though I wasn't the biggest fan of necessarily those games, but yeah, she's worked on, I think it was the Batman game that they did, and she did also like The Walking Dead and Batman and some like indie stuff and whatnot. And then they had Sam Maggs, who has done comic books, but she's done some other video game work before. And okay, she's also done some My Little Pony comics, My Little Pony and Transformers comic crossover.
Very different.
Very different, yeah. Some Wonder Woman, and I believe it was Captain Marvel too. So with video games, I'm looking it up right now. She was an associate writer at BioWare before, actually. She actually contributed to some Cards Against Humanity stuff. And then she also wrote the Anthem, actually. Which
those
sucks.
Are very different things, but yeah, Anthem.
And so what she's done with Insomniac, so she's a senior writer at Insomniac. She worked on the City That Never Sleeps DLC for Spider-Man. That's what she did. There we go. So because it was going to bother me just for the longest time that I couldn't figure out what these women had done. Because I looked it up before and I read it. I just couldn't quite remember on top of my head, just being on the spot on the podcast and such. But
that always gets me.
I know it sucks every time. It's happened so many times on this podcast where I'm just like, I'm trying to say something, like even earlier, like I was trying to think of Outriders. I couldn't think of that damn game's name.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. It's probably the worst game I've played this year outside of the medium. I didn't like the medium either. But besides that, anyways, but let's get kind of like into the gameplay, because it felt very much like Ratchet and Clank, but they added a couple, little things, and like dashing was a new thing, which you wouldn't have experienced before, which I really liked.
Right.
Especially when the way they animated the dash though, like when they would go and you kind of like see like
frame by frame.
Yeah, frame by frame of them. It was so cool, but it didn't feel slowed down either. Like it felt quick, but because the way they animated it, it's like almost, I don't know, like it's so hard to describe. Like it wasn't slow motion or anything like that, but it kind of gave you that effect almost, You
could just tell from going one position to the other how they got there, kind of thing. And they described what kind of ability that was. I don't remember, but it was definitely like in the universe, and it made sense.
Yeah, I think that's what's cool about Insomniac is they don't just throw in mechanics. Like it's all serves the story, and like that is something where, in terms of storytelling and game design, I think is where the top tier studios do best. Like when you look at the best studios, that's what they do, and I think From Software Insomniac. I'm looking at Dark Souls 3, which is on my PC. It's like and I have Sekiro 2, and they're both on my PC, so I can see that, and that's what got in my head. Insomniac does so well. Like, even when you look at Spider-Man, it's like, hey, he's really techy and stuff like that. He can make his own gadgets. So when you make your gadgets, it's not like, oh, look at me, I got this new gadget from, I don't know, from this vendor who sells Spider-Man gadgets. It's like, no, just Peter Parker's just gonna make his own stuff, and like the way they explain that, and it's not just like just thrown in there, Sure, Ratchet and Clank has a vendor where you can just buy guns, but it's explained. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
she is trying to fight she's arming the resistance against Emperor Nefarious, and she kind of explains that to you.
How did they get guns in the past games?
I think you just bought them.
Okay. Just not from her then? She wasn't like a new, like a older character?
I don't remember. I think it'd just be like there was like a box that was a store and you go to it. I don't remember if there were different things for certain games, and it's been a while since I played the 2016 one, and obviously it's been forever since I played Up Your Arsenal, since I was a PlayStation 2 game. I don't have a PS2 lying around, but at least for this game, they definitely did that, and I really appreciate that when games do that. And it's not that it's awful when it doesn't fit narratively, but it definitely is nice though when you can tie in game mechanics and storytelling and it's tied together. There's an actual term for that. I'm totally blanking. I took a whole.
Is it like gamifying, or is it like? Because I know what you're talking about. Because I took many
I'm blanking
classes
because I took a whole last semester. I had a whole class on this whole thing.
I took a game studies class. I took game studies, and we learned about like rhetoric in game, like procedural rhetoric. That's what I'm thinking. Like when you actually kind of put that into the procedures of the games.
The term I was thinking of is ludo narrative harmony is what I was thinking of.
Yeah, I've heard of ludonarrative before.
Yeah, so basically it means ludonarrative dissonance is basically there's conflict between the narrative being told and the way it's being told through gameplay. And and they definitely had that. And that was so great just to be like, hey, this is what you need to do, and how can we get you to this point, but make it work in the with the story and that guy giving you the equipment to dash and stuff like that, and or like how the rifts worked and being like, hey, you have this tether and like this is kind of like how it works, but also this is how it just works narratively and how that plays into everything. I thought it was really great on how there was no seams, like it is all seamless and tied together. It's not like you have your story and you have your gameplay. It's separate ends of it, and they're kind of butting heads.
Yeah.
I also just felt like it's so fluid, like just moving, combat, all that stuff. It's just like, how does Insomniac do that? Like if Spider-Man and all these other games, they're all just so fluid with like movement and combat and stuff like that, and so impressive,
Oh yeah, and I like that. Each time you use like a gun, it really does feel like it's a part of the story too. Like you'll take out your sprinkler, and then it interacts with the environment well, and then you take out your other gun to finally like stun them. Or there was a lot of different options there, and I liked how each one felt very different from the other. And I basically used every single gun at one point.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like when a game gives you an insane amount of guns, like I can't remember how many. There's like over, like I think it's close to 20 guns more or less.
You switch through 3 different wheels.
Yeah, but the third wheel I don't think gets filled up all the way. So it's like, and I think it's 16 or 8 on the first 2 wheels, and then you get an extra like 3 or 4 guns. And there's an extra one you can unlock depending on collectibles. On one of the collectibles you can get. That gives you the Rhino, which drops different things from other dimensions like spaceships and such. And some of the objects it'll drop are from other PlayStation games. Like
I didn't know that.
Oh, really? Yeah. It's I can't remember everything they drop, but I know they dropped the Jeep that you drive in Uncharted 4.
What?
And I think there's something from Last of Us, maybe. I can't remember all
Oh,
the
that's
games
cool.
that are included with it, but yeah, it just drops a bunch of random objects, and sometimes you'll have an object from another PlayStation game, and it's really
Is that
awesome.
if you win the arena? Because I got to gold level arenas, and then like I just didn't
No, it
complete the whole thing.
was one of the collectibles. I'm trying to think on how you get it. You have to collect. Let me see here, because you have to.
Are you a trophy hunter? Do you like try to 100%?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I think it's through the spy bots. That's what you need to do. You need to collect all the
Oh,
spy
okay.
bots. That's right.
Okay.
No, I'm not. I was thinking about platinuming Ratchet and Clank, but then there was a couple that I just didn't want to put my energy to unlocking. For me, it's like if I love a game, I'll get anything that seems fun to get. But anything that's
Yeah.
too much work, then I just say, screw it. I don't want to do it. So
Yeah, I don't want to
opt out.
find 50 of Odin's crows in God of War. Like, as much as the platinum would have been cool, I'm like, I'm not platinum.
That was another game where I was like, I'm gonna like, because I replayed God of War because they had the PS5 update, and I was playing it 60 FPS and 4K. It was incredible. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna platinum this game because I have like 3 or 4 trophies left in that game, so I'm like almost to platinum. And then I was like, it's a lot of work to get these last couple, and I gained like a couple more trophies, but like I just had a couple left, and I was like, I'm not gonna do this. So I'm not really a big trophy hunter. Are you at all?
No, God, no. I'm just like, I play it and I don't care if I get I don't even think I've gotten one platinum before. I think I've 100%ed like a couple games, but for some reason they weren't important enough to give me a platinum trophy for it.
I've done Spider-Man, not Miles Morales, but only the regular Spider-Man. And then I did actually just recently got the platinum for The Last of Us too, actually.
Wait, if you needed the platinum for that, did you have to do like the super hardcore difficulty things?
You can do everything like on the easiest difficulty, I think.
Well, that's not so bad then.
It's really not bad at all. You the only one that's bad is you have to do permadeath, but you just put on the easiest difficulty and then you can just plow through the game and not die.
So did you have to do permadeath but on easiest difficulty and finish the whole thing?
Yeah, but there's different settings for permadeath, so you can do per chapter, per act, or the whole game. And I just did per like chapter or whatever.
Yeah.
So
I've seen definitely some videos online where someone's like makes this really stupid mistake and they just fall off and they die and they have to start the whole game over. Yeah. Like, that's not for me. Yeah. I don't find that fun.
Yeah, absolutely. But then, like, going back to the guns though, like, what is so interesting, because there's so many games where it's like that, where you have a giant weapon wheel and there's like a million guns that you're using, you know? And this, it's like, I was using almost every gun, and it kind of makes you, because your ammo supply is pretty low, even when you upgrade the guns, and the upgrading is awesome. It's super intuitive, but also like it makes a huge difference. Especially when it changes the actual properties of the gun, like it shoots more, like it shoots differently or whatever. Stuff like that is really cool, but I really like just like how it forces you enough to go try different guns, but they're all so fun and so well done. I don't care, you know, like there's games where it's like it makes you use other gadgets or weapons or whatever, but this, it's like, man, I don't care if I'm out of ammo of this gun, I'll go use this other gun and do that, you know. And they just like, the variety was insane, you know. It wasn't just like machine gun, shotgun, you know. It was just like, there's some really creative ones. So you mentioned the plant one, or for people who don't know, it's like a little turret, and it freezes enemies and hurts them, but they turn into like flowers essentially, or like plants. And my favorite one was there's that swamp planet, and you fight it's like almost like a T-Rex sort of deal, you know, that you fight. And I was like, I turned it into a flower or like a plant or whatever from the turrets or whatever, and I took a screenshot because it's just like so funny. Just like it was all green with the vines and all that stuff covering it, but its eyes were like these really bright red flowers, and just looked so funny. I loved it. And yeah, I was really impressed with like because I always go in thinking I'm not going to use every gun. There's no way.
Yeah.
But then I do. And since you didn't play Sunset Overdrive or some of these other games, but well, even with Spider-Man, I didn't use every gadget because I didn't like every gadget in Spider-Man. I think that's the one exception. But like Sunset Overdrive, I liked every gun, and every gun felt differently and really cool, and so that worked. But yeah, I was just blown away by like, and especially since I kept thinking, how many more guns am I gonna get?
Yeah.
You know? There's so many.
I was kind of hoping to finish that third wheel. A little part of me wanted more.
Did you have a favorite gun?
I don't know. I really liked was it a black hole one, or it was just any of the really powerful ones. I liked the one where it was like a shotgun, but if you upgrade enough, it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like it would just
it would kind of shoot a little like extra rounds or whatever.
Yeah. I liked one of the best ones was actually like the one where you get your like minion robots. They really helped me out.
That one I'm like 90% sure has been in other Ratchet and Clank games. I think I don't know if all of them are in other games, but I think some of the weapons definitely are from other games. But yeah, that seeing them just like eat enemies alive is so fun. I loved it.
They had a couple of those where you kind of had helpers.
Yeah.
But those were my favorite.
Yeah, stuff like that was because there was the fungus one where they would like be like fungus robot turret things, then the plant one, then the robot one or whatever.
I thought a weird one that felt really cool on the controller though, because I couldn't figure out how to use it. I was like, how does this work? It was like the ricochet one.
Oh yeah.
Where it would like hit them, and then like every time you hit the trigger, it would like bounce off of them.
The trigger. You have to hold the trigger. Yeah, and then it would.
I kind of pressed multiple times.
Yeah, that's not how it worked. No, you hold the trigger and it shoots this thing that hits the enemy, kind of goes in the air, and then it slams back into the enemy and keeps slamming back into them.
I did figure that one out, but it took a while, and I was like, oh, this feels really cool. At least I did use it a couple times though.
I also really liked the pixelizer where it was like almost like a shotgun blast, but it would then pixelate enemies and stuff like that.
I had fun with that.
Effect. I saw that in like a preview for the game, like like when they were just kind of showing, like I think it was in the first gameplay video that they had released or whatever, and seeing them do that, I was like, oh my god, that gun, I'm gonna use it a lot. I loved it. I thought it was so cool.
And they give it to you at the beginning. I don't know if it was because it was only for pre-order bonuses. I don't know if...
No, I think it's just like an early unlock. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, because you get your normal shooter and then you have the pixelizer. And I really like how you shoot an enemy and it makes those even like old, like 8-bit, 16-bit, I don't know, like noises as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think... The two that just felt the most powerful though, like just being like, oh my god, I have so much immense power in my hands right now, was it was the Negatron Collider. It was the thing that shot that beam. Essentially it's just like a single laser beam, and it just destroyed. The damage on that thing is insane. It just would destroy anything. That's the first thing
I pull out for like the big ones.
It is also great for like dealing with like crowds of enemies, and then you just would kind of spray it through, and then it would wipe out like over half the enemies that would be in front of you. And I think you mentioned it, that shotgun thing, the Enforcer, I think was what you were referring to.
Yes.
That thing was so cool, and
it was just really good.
Blast things away. I think what helped with the impact of it all too is just like not just the controller, but like seeing how things would blow up and just get destroyed, it's just like, oh man, you really felt like there were a lot of power to the guns. And even the ones that weren't as impactful, like you get that, like you start off the game with like that blasting pistol. It's like a machine gun, or you can use it as a pistol, but it's still like, it was fun. Like everything was fun. And I think that's what they really embraced in this game, was just like, hey, we're just gonna have nonstop fun. We're just gonna really lean into it. And one of my favorite things that I think they've had things similar in previous games. When you got the the boosting boots, and you can just kind of like glide above the ground and go so fast,
Oh, I loved that part where
It
you were
was
just
the most addicting thing
speeds.
ever.
Oh, I was just like, I could use this all day, and you push you with your speed. Yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah,
be spoiled with that.
it was a great way to like really, because there's some areas that are pretty big, and it's like, all right, how
Oh
do I get
yeah,
through like this really big area? And it's just like just glide through it, and you go so fast, and like you really felt the speed, and like
yeah.
being like, wow, this is like I feel like I'm going fast. And I feel the
Mm,
power of these boots. Um, before we got started, you're telling me how you just got Cyberpunk, right? A
yeah.
problem I have with that game is the cars don't feel like they have power to them. Like I don't feel like I'm going fast. Um,
Honestly, I did hear it was difficult to drive. Honestly, I'm fine driving in the cars. I can even drive in first person. I found that it's not even that difficult. I've definitely had worse games where the driving is absolute crap. But uh once I got a bike, I think first person bike is so difficult to drive.
hmm.
But honestly, I know what you mean. It would only go to like 100,
Yeah,
and
like
sometimes you
this
feel like
the
you're not going
speedometer would
fast.
like, even at when you get to a super fast car, it's like it's a lot, but it's like I don't feel like I'm going that speed, like I don't feel the
Yeah.
power of the engine and the power of the vehicle, but this, it's like these are like sci-fi hover boots, and they're way more
Yeah.
powerful than every car in Cyberpunk. And I'm just using this as an excuse to talk bad about Cyberpunk,
Yeah.
just because I was so disappointed in that game, and I'm so a little sour on it. But yeah, I just love like that, and like the way the game would have you chain these things together. Like it would be like, hey, you need speed, so use your hover
Yeah.
boots to go up this ramp, and then there's a thing
Hit
for
all
you to
the
grapple
buttons.
on, and you'd swing off that, and then you would
Uh-huh.
do another, or then you'd have to dash and wall run on. It's like all that stuff was just like when you would chain it together and you would really nail it. It felt so good.
Oh yeah, especially when you're on those rails and you have to think fast, but at the same time not too fast, because honestly, it was slow enough for me to like understand how to do it and feel like I'm really powerful.
It was very much like a I don't know, it had like the intensity to it, but I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like, oh no, I can't mess up or anything like that. I wasn't
Yeah.
afraid of messing up, but I still felt tense, and I still felt like the way the characters probably have felt like, oh my god, I need to get onto
Mm-hmm.
this other rail, or else I'm gonna like smash into this thing or whatever. I'm like, oh, I'll just go to the right, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
good. But I still felt that because it was like the execution of it was just so intense and so thrilling. And so, since you mentioned the rails, I just loved how cinematic some of the gameplay sections are.
Oh
Like
yeah.
the giant robot, the fixer, when you're going on the rails and he's destroying everything, that was like a legit an amusement park ride. Did you get that sensation also?
Yeah, it was also with was it the Kraken one where
Oh
you
yeah,
were
yeah, yeah.
constantly trying to get away from it? Ratchet and Clank would be a perfect like roller coaster ride,
Oh my
but
god, yeah. Like
I
I'm
want PlayStation Park.
oh, that would be so cool.
Like Universal Studios has the now what is it? Mario World? Super
Yeah,
Mario
there's like,
World?
and I think there's like,
Definitely love to go
yeah,
there.
there's a couple, like, I think there's like a couple like video game related like amusement park type things, whether in
Right.
like established amusement parks like that, or like I think Nintendo's doing its actual own thing. Um,
I could definitely see a section where it looks like Ratchet and Clank and you can get buy food that looks like the intergalactic places.
yeah,
I'm thinking too far ahead now.
I know. I would love that, especially since like I was actually like that while going through the rails of the fixer section was one of my favorite parts of the game. I was a little bummed because I was just like, man, I'm never gonna be able to experience this like differently. And actually, outside of a roller coaster, you know what else it reminded me in as just like an amazing cinematic yet gameplay like experience, and be like, oh my god, everything's so crazy and stuff like that as I'm going through this area, was in The Last of Us 2 when you're riding on the horse through the Seraphites village. It's like burning down towards
Yeah.
the end of the game. Like like I just replaying that game recently to get my platinum. It's just like jaw dropping, that section, you know.
Oh yeah. It
And
was less like I'm having fun and more like I might cry in a second if I
yeah,
don't get out of here soon.
but
But
it's
I
just
get
like
the feeling.
it was like almost like a ride though, because it was
Hmm.
just so engrossing. I was like, yeah, I was like, wow, this is so impressive. And I will say though, that is actually another critique I have of Rift Apart though. I feel like there weren't enough of those sections. Like there was like some really cool cinematic boss fights. Like the first boss you have, like that giant robot thing that you're fighting, and then you're going through the different dimensions and stuff like that. But I was like, it felt a little, I was like, oh wow, the bosses are gonna be like this consistently. And there's like maybe like two or three other bosses that where it's like really like kind of cinematic and like crazy set pieces and stuff like that. But then most of the bosses were just like, hey, you're in a very tight little area and you just have to shoot them as they come at you or
Yeah.
whatever. Like the very like I liked the final boss fight. I liked all the boss fights, but it sets such a high bar with that first boss fight, you know, that I was just like, oh wow, like I'm not getting anything else like that's to that level of really utilizing going through different dimensions and having something really kind of like a cinematic boss fight, you know, or cinematic gameplay experience, you know, even if it's not a boss fight, but the fixer was the same sort of thing, you know, like wow, this is like a gameplay section, but it feels so cinematic, and I love stuff like that. And I wish the game really kind of leaned a little bit further into it, because it's like they had that set up and then they just didn't quite do it with the more important ones, especially when that one robot that you fight and you go through the different dimensions becomes just a normal enemy that you end up fighting a bunch throughout the game. So I'm like, oh, it kind of took away the specialness of that fight.
But otherwise, that just makes me feel like we should get like DLC and just a bit more story content. Because I feel like I could easily go back, and I feel like when you finish the story, I've already done the side quest. There is one, that stupid one where you have to find like all the things for that dragon.
Yeah.
The purple things. There, I have 3 left. There's no more icons on the map. I have got no idea where they are on this map, so I couldn't complete it.
Unlocked it breathing fire?
Yes. So when I got that part, it was like, oh, now I can find all the other things. And then finally there was like 3 left and I have no idea where they are, and so I gave up.
I don't know if it's a story related item or if it's an optional thing. It could, I can't remember. I'm blanking on it. But in the pirate level, there is an item that shows every item on the map.
Oh, damn it.
Did you not get that?
I don't know. Now I'm like trying to think back. I don't remember that.
Oh, well, if you want to complete that side mission, go back to the pirate level and there is an item that you can get. I can't remember if it's an optional thing or not.
Because honestly, it's only for like one of those gold screw things. I don't really care now that I'm like done it, but that's like, I feel like we could have had more side content, especially on the planets. Like I just wish there were more side missions to do.
Yeah, because there's only one side mission per planet, and even then, not every planet has a side mission, you know?
Yeah.
But they only did like one, and that was it. And then and
it's only like, oh, do this, and you're done. It's not like, oh, continue to kind of figure out what else you could do and how you can help these people.
I thought it was fun, but it was definitely like all right, just go do this thing or whatever. And it's like, oh, okay, you know, this is enjoyable.
It's like, it's fine. Games don't have to be super long, but it would have been fun to like explore more of these planets. Yeah,
I get that. I did like how every planet felt so unique and had its own environment and just was so different. I loved that. I thought it really changed it too, because it wasn't just like, here's just a reskinned of the same map. Here's something that's fundamentally different. Like there's that one planet where you have to hit the crystals that would change the whole environment, you know, to an alternate dimension of this planet. And it was all destroyed and stuff like that. There's like that stuff like that is so cool. Or being like, hey, in the swamp planet, you need to get over the acid, you know, that's like that's everywhere. and you use the beetles to ride them, and you can zoom around the whole map, with those beetles. I loved those beetles. They were so much
I
fun.
loved them, but there were so many points where I tried to break the game and get somewhere that I wasn't supposed to, maybe, and I would just like glitch out and hit a wall. Or with that dragon, I would try to get to so many places that like I'm like, oh, I just want to hop off here. I could see some things, but you're not allowed. You're only allowed to like stop at certain places. Then I was a little like, oh, stop just dying and crashing. But
Well, I thought the level design was fantastic. Not only the levels looked different, but I thought just in terms of actually like going around them and stuff like that was very well crafted and it really worked for the gameplay. But there were a couple of points though, like you said, I feel like I could have gotten some places that the game like it made it like it felt like it was clear to me that I could go there, but the game's like, no, there's an invisible wall, or there's literally nothing here, so you're just kind of stuck. And I was like, there was a couple places I got stuck at because I managed to get there, and then I'm like, there's nothing here.
I couldn't find my way back.
Yeah, now I have to figure it out, and it's like stuff like that. It was kind of soured it.
Honestly, there weren't too many glitches, but I did find a lot of invisible walls, or like Ratchet or Rivet would like just walk somewhere weird and then like you'd see their body kind of go. I'm like, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. Jump out.
Yeah, I didn't have anything too crazy like that. What'd you think of because there was a couple of sections with Ratchet, or not Ratchet, but Clank's puzzle levels, but there were also the glitch levels too, which is another little robot that Ratchet had to hack things and stuff like that, and you had to battle through like the viruses that were like just basically robot enemies and stuff like that. Like, what do you think of those of those sections?
Oh, I love them because honestly, I thought those were some of the most unique things. So many of these, like the things you could do in this game, are incredibly different from one another. I really liked Clank's, like, because it wasn't too difficult and I understood it, but it was also, it tickled my brain enough to be like, oh, I feel like I'm really solving these problems. And I also did like the glitch ones. I thought, oh, the haptic feedback or the adapted triggers when you're glitch, and it just felt really cool when you were doing like the machine gun kind of feeling. I thought she was even a cool character, even though she's like a freaking glitch robot thing.
Yeah, I thought her levels were fine. I didn't love them. I didn't really care for them too much. I just thought, I don't know, like it was different and unique, but I just thought it was a little tedious trying to get around and trying to like find like, because you had to destroy this sack things, but you had like press a button to unlock to bring down the shield and fight it. I thought it was just like a little tedious and a little annoying, but at the same time, it's still cool and it's different. I thought Glitch was super cute, and I love about this game is everything in this game is so cute. Even if they're a bad guy, everything's so cute, and I love it. But for Clank, I was about to say Ratchet yet again. For Clank, I always love his little puzzle sections. They always give him, like, even from the early games, he always gets like these puzzle sections, and they always utilize like little mini Clanks in some capacity. And I liked how they kind of changed it up, where they kind of explained it more of it in the with the themes of the dimensions and stuff like that. You know, and it was different. It was just it was a different type of puzzle, and like you said, it wasn't overly hard, but it was enough to give me that satisfaction of, hey, I solved this. You know. At the same time, though, there were a couple times where I had to really think, because I'm just dumb, and I'm just like, when you give me a puzzle, and I'm like, what do I do? Because there were a couple times where I had to, like, it took me way too long than I want to admit of getting through some of this, especially the later ones, where I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. What am I supposed to do? Like, how am I supposed to use these orbs to, speed up the robots or send them flying through the air and stuff like that, and using the combinations it was enough where it made me feel creative, but it clearly was designed of, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z. But it's enough where the way it was done made me feel like I solved it and not the game laying it out for me or anything like that.
No.
But I'm just a dumb person, so there was a couple things I couldn't figure out, and that's not on the game's fault. That's just me playing literally any game with puzzles, and I go, what am I supposed to do? And the game's like, you need to do this. It's very clear. I'm like, I didn't understand that at all. I did like, though, the way they did that, though, and just like how much different stuff there is that it throws at you, whether that's a scripted thing like the Fixer, or it was, hey, you're going to do these puzzles right now, or you're going to do X, Y, and Z, or here's a new mechanic like the glide boots. It did a good job of like bringing you variety and really making it engaging. And I just wish there were more games that take that cue of, one, don't be overly long, just be concise, just don't have filler or anything or fluff, and it was a very concise, dense game, but also it was like, hey, let's just not like waste your in terms of like, hey, we're going to implement this thing, let's make sure it feels different, gives some different experiences and stuff like that. But I think my biggest gripe though in terms of gameplay was that Rivet and Ratchet felt the exact same. And it's one of those things where game design, it makes total sense. I totally get like the mentality of it. And this is not a knock on the decision at all. It is just one of those things where I wish there was something. I don't know what, because I'm not a game designer. I'm not smart. I don't know what they could have done, but they had all of your progress in terms of collectibles, in terms of armor, weapons, upgrades, all that stuff, all transferred.
Yeah.
Some of it didn't really make sense. Like how did one character gives you, was Ratchet or Rivet, an item, here you go, and then the other one just magically has it, like that's where when I talked about the ludonarrative
dissonance,
that's where the dissonance comes in, and it kind of butts heads a little bit. That was the only time where it kind of did that, but I understand, but it wasn't in a necessarily a negative way because they had to do it. It's like, I understand why. I just wish there was something, maybe a different feel to them in terms of movement, or even just like having different animations. You look at Spider-Man, like as I replayed Spider-Man Remastered, but then I went to play Miles Morales just so I can see what the difference was between Peter Parker and Miles. They had different gadgets and stuff different. Like it was very different in terms of obviously they had different gadgets like that, but they animated it differently, and just animating things differently makes a huge difference, of being like, just the way they kind of, Spider-Man, Peter Parker looks a lot smoother and a lot like he knows what he's doing when he's flipping through the air and stuff like that. And Miles, he's just like kind of flying all over the place, a little bit, And
if you really liked your 60 FPS, did you put on the Into the Spider-Verse outfit with that thing that makes it look like choppy?
Oh yeah, it was like just like
but honestly, I was having fun with that.
Yeah, stuff like that was super cool, and like, but that was just a way to do it. Like that was a way to not drastically change the gameplay experience, so you still feel like you're Spider-Man, the same feeling you had in 2018 with Miles Morales. But I just felt like Ratchet and Clank, they could have done something just in terms of like, hey, this is, like Rivet, that when you use her hammer, because the only difference is she has a hammer, he has a wrench. That's it in terms of melee, but it feels the exact same. I just wish her animations may have been a little bit different, or when she dashed, she did like something different. I don't know, stuff like that. I think it would have been a better touch just to distinguish the two. And I hope
honestly,
if they bring her back, they do something like that. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
I could definitely see, like, maybe if they spent more time or went a different direction, that you do get only some weapons with Ratchet. And because she's like a fugitive at the beginning, she has different weapons and you unlock different weapons. And then maybe Ratchet has his own set of armor because they share the same armor sets. But maybe she has something different. I honestly think that could have worked because it would have made more sense. But honestly, it didn't bother me incredibly.
Yeah, it didn't bother me incredibly. I just like, it was one of those things where like, before playing the game, I was going in being like, I wonder if they're gonna do anything to distinguish the two, and then I was just like, oh, they didn't. Oh, okay, that's kind of disappointing. Yeah, but it wasn't like breaking or anything like that. But what do you think about?
Went into this. I went into this game thinking, oh, you can use that Rift device whenever, right? And even though you couldn't, there was only certain places. It didn't make me upset. It was more like, oh, this is still a unique gameplay element.
You read my mind because I was going to go into the whole dimension use and stuff like that. Yeah, I had mixed feelings about it. I thought, because when it was when it would really matter, it would really substantial. Like you had like these pocket rifts, you know, like the pocket
Mm-hmm.
dimensions, whatever they called them, which are basically little platforming sections and would reward you with a collectible at the end, usually an armor piece. I think they were all
Mm-hmm.
armor pieces. I thought those were
Yeah.
super cool. There was a planet I mentioned where you hit the crystals and it changes everything, where it's the
Mm-hmm.
same planet but it's all ruined and stuff like that and blown to pieces. So like that was really cool and really impactful. But just being like, hey, you have your tether and there's like a little rift you can get to a platform or to get to a vantage point for
Mm-hmm.
enemies, stuff like that. I wasn't crazy about it. I was just like, oh, okay. I thought they the way they talked about it, I thought there were going to be more different types of rifts, and I just thought it was going to be
Mm-hmm.
utilized a little bit more creatively. I just felt like
Yeah.
it was a little gimmicky at times. There were times where it really worked, but there are times where it's like, oh, this is just you needed to get in extra dimensional rifts and stuff like that because that's what the game's all about in terms of
Mm-hmm.
stories. You have to implement the gameplay, and then you're just kind of throwing some stuff in here just to kind of fill the gap, you know, of like, hey, look, dimensions and stuff like that. And I just like it could have impacted the gameplay experience a little bit more. Um,
I think some of that could be like, I think a lot of this game is almost taking advantage of what now the PS5 can do.
yeah,
And it's
I
like,
think
oh, look at, you can hit this crystal and instantly, no loading screens at all, get to this one place. Oh, and then they advertised it a bit like, oh, switch rifts anytime you want. But it's not like that. As impressive as it is really to like go into those pocket dimensions, that's definitely, they were aiming for, look what we can do now.
it serves the visuals of the game, which is absolutely
Mm-hmm.
stunning. I love the color usage, and the ray tracing is game changing in terms of the visuals, and it looks incredible. And it definitely shows the PS5's power. The SSD is so impressive. It is like the only loading really is when you travel to another planet. You know, it does a little cutscene of you
Yeah.
flying there, and that's it. And it's super quick. You know, but all the like when you're actually on the planet, no loading screens whatsoever. Like the fact that you can
No.
going through those pocket dimensions, it blew me away every single time. I was just
Yeah.
like, I'm like, how did I not have to load in? How can I turn around and see the other side of it through and through? Like
Yeah.
it's a door, you know? Like
That
I'm
was
just
my
going
favorite
through.
part, like pulling them and then walking through and then turning around, and you're like, how did this work?
It's so
No
seamless. Like
loading. Yeah.
you just loaded up an entire new level essentially, and it's just like it's just walking through a door, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. And I assume the way it's technically working, I assume like when you pull the rift open in that moment, it's loading and it's super quick. I assume that's
Yeah.
what it's doing in the background. And then it's super quick, but then that's it though. Like it's loaded in, it's in the game now. And then you can just go through it whenever you want.
Yeah.
And it's just like, wow, this is just like the PlayStation 5 is a beast. It's
Oh,
insane.
definitely.
It's like, man. And sure, is it a little bit tech-domy, you know, to be like, look at what the PS5 can do, and it's not really like as substantial for the gameplay. Sure, you could argue that, but man, it's just so impressive. I like it. A part of me cares, but also a part of me is just like, wow, that's crazy. It looks so
Honestly,
cool.
I don't know if I would care if we didn't have the controller change, because you can go from an Xbox One to an Xbox Series X, and it's virtually the same controller, same thing. May look a little different, but when you go from a PS4 to a PS5, you feel every single difference, and that's why I love PlayStation.
Yeah, I
No,
agree.
no hate Xbox. Sorry.
I love Xbox for its own reasons, but there's just certain
Yeah.
things. They're just completely different platforms now. Like I've been
Oh,
saying
yeah.
this for a while now. It's like they're just like their goals are so different. It's like I don't think I think it's insane to compare the two anymore. You know, but at the same
Console
time,
wars are definitely over.
yeah, unless you're some loser who just has to rant about it
Yeah.
on Twitter.
Yeah.
But I thought just like also just visually, like, I thought it was just so stunning. Like it's a way to like because there are weird people who think these types of cartoony games just graphically aren't impressive, but people when the conversation happens about games visuals, there's something I always see, whether that's just your average gamer or even critics. Like I even read reviews and I go, they're not getting the two distinction because there's a difference between art direction and graphics, you know?
Uh-huh.
And that's something I always try to distinguish when talking about this stuff. And Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, it is both they have incredible art direction, but it's also like super high fidelity, super detailed. Like the fur on Ratchet and Rivet looks incredible. The shine on the robots, whether it's Clank Kit or an enemy robot, is so impressive. Like the ray tracing is just another the cherry on top, and it's like, wow, this just looks incredible. Like it's like in the beginning you said it's like one of the best looking games you've ever seen. It's up there. Like I think I don't for me like,
I don't know what game could be first, honestly, besides that. Not yet.
For me, in terms of talking about like the best looking games, I always categorize in two sections because I don't think it's fair to compare a game this stylish versus a game more realistic. Like the best looking game I think I've seen, I think in terms of like realism or whatever, and like really high fidelity and like stuff like that, is The Last of Us 2. But I would say in terms of like a stylish game, like in the realm of Ratchet and Clank, it's Ratchet and Clank. Like it's jaw dropping, and playing on a 4K TV in like 60 FPS is just like, I know the game's not in 4K because I'm playing on performance ray tracing, but still it's just like, wow, this just like looks just stunning. And the fact that it's running so smoothly too, it's just like, wow, like this is what the generation's going to be. And we're this early on, Anyka.
Oh, yeah. And
it's like, if you remember, like when the PS4 and the Xbox One came out, like some of those early games were like, wow, this is really impressive. Like for Xbox, there was Rise, which was a huge, eye catcher for, like what the Xbox One can do. And then for the PS4, you had some of these games that were coming out early on, like Bloodborne and that last infamous game, Second Son. It's like, wow, this looks great. But then you get to the end of the generation and you get to games like The Last of Us, Ghost of Tsushima, and you're like, no, this, like the step up from 2013 to about like 2019 or in 2020 was like a huge step. And I just like, I cannot get my brain around. And this is something I've been thinking about since the new consoles have arrived, is what's the jump from 2021 to like 2029 or whenever the end of the cycle is, like let's say it's 2030, let's say it's a 9-year thing. What, like I literally can't fathom.
I literally can't wrap my head around what games will look like. Games cannot be more realistic than they already are, but we're going to probably be ones like Ratchet and Clank.
Like how does Insomniac, like the next Ratchet and Clank, who knows? Let's say that's in 5 years. Let's just say, because I think they're working on like an online game, and I assume they're working on Spider-Man 2. So let's just say let's say they get 2 games in the next few years. So like within 5 or 6 years, we get a new Ratchet and Clank. That game, obviously, it's a new iteration. It's going to look better than this, right? How though?
I know. You don't get it, but honestly, I remember playing Last of Us Part 2 and said, this is the cap. We can't get better than this. And somehow I look at Ratchet and I still say this is even better. Maybe that's because I'm also in 60 FPS, but when I look at best looking game, I'm not like, oh, it's got to be the most realistic.
Yeah.
Obviously, because it's set in a real world, The Last of Us Part 2 is probably more realistic looking, but at the same time, Ratchet still just looks so good for a PS5 game. And I think, did you say you were playing Last of Us Part 2 on the new PS5 version?
Yeah, with the update, yeah. So it's
okay, that's definitely good quality then.
Yeah, so I have because I have a better TV now, so I have a higher resolution. I have HDR now because of my TV. Also, I have 60 FPS because of the update. And so playing that game in 60 FPS, ooh, it's smooth as butter on it. You need to re-download Last of Us 2, and you need to play that as soon as possible.
I need to, because the storage on PS5s right now are not that great. So I have to like...
Wait, are you running into storage issues?
Yeah, I'm already full. I don't know how. And I'm like, maybe because it's like... Because you can't plug in any external drives, right? Not yet, at least.
Not for games. I think it's really confusing. I can't remember what it is, but I think there's certain things you can save, because I do put my screenshots on a flash drive, which is when I transfer it to my PC.
Right.
And there's certain other stuff you can transfer over, but not games as of yet. I think they said they're working on that.
I don't know what's taking up all my space because it's like already told me I can't do an update because it's that full. And I'm like, how? And I'm trying to like pick and choose. And I'm like, but this is an online game I'm still kind of playing. And
yeah,
but
I have a good bit of games on there, but I'm not running into that issue at all. I have so much room.
What am I doing then? I can't even delete Village because I'm like, well, what if the DLC comes out? If you delete something from the storage and I have PS Plus, does that mean like my save data is in the cloud?
If you own the game, you own the game.
No, but like my save data.
Oh,
do you know if that completely
no, that's a separate thing because you have your game storage. Then I think the save data is like I think another thing. I'm like 90% sure.
Yeah.
Also, maybe look at your.
It would be like cloud storage.
Maybe look at your media and see what screenshots or videos you have captured.
Pro tip, yeah, maybe there's like a really.
There's a. By default, the PlayStation 5 captures screenshots and or video of you getting trophies.
Yes, I hate that. So I've turned it off, but it still has the video option. So I think I have to turn the video one off.
Yeah, that's
get rid of them. That's probably taking up my space.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. But I don't know. Is there anything else that you want to talk about Rift Apart on before we end here?
I mean, I think we've just covered everything. I love this game, and I just wish it was a little bit longer, or we get like a little bit of DLC. But I'm just excited for whatever Insomniac comes up next. They're definitely one of my favorite people.
Yeah, and I think my last like kind of takeaway that I want to give people is that I've said it a million times on this podcast. I've been saying it just for years. Like Insomniac's just I think one of the best studios, especially lately with Sunset Overdrive to both Spider-Man games and now this and the Ratchet and Clank 2016 retelling. Like I think they are a top tier studio, and I've been saying that. And I feel like they never gotten that recognition, and then they kind of got these hits, and then it was like, oh, Spider-Man is like incredible, one of the best PS4 games. Oh my God, Miles Morales, what a great shorter kind of condensed follow-up, But now this game, I saw a lot of people being like, one, they'd be like, hey, this is my first Ratchet and Clank game, and I love it. Two, oh my God, is Insomniac like one of the best studios in the entire industry? The answer is yes, they are. And I
feel like people should have woken up when Spider-Man was first announced, because already I was
this is a great superhero game, and like this is awesome as a game, but not speaking for the whole studio. I'm like, no, it's them, I
mean, Sony did purchase them or add them to them. What was it, like a bit after the first Spider-Man came out?
Yeah, it must have been. I can't remember when that was, but yeah, they bought them, and they just bought House Marquee.
Yeah,
who made Returnal.
Wasn't there like a leaked thing that was like, "Oh, congrats, Bluepoint," but
they messed up. They posted the wrong thing. They said the image was of it was Bluepoint's logo instead of House Marquee's.
Yeah.
Just buy Bluepoint. We literally the entire gaming community and industry knows you're going to PlayStation. Just do it already.
Yeah, just do it. But I'm glad for Returnal now, because now that whatever that studio's working on, even if it's not a Returnal sequel, they're getting their arsenal up for whatever the hell they have planned for the next few years. With
House Marquee, Insomniac, Sucker Punch, Naughty Dog, man, what a bunch of talented, awesome studios. Like the list goes on and on. And and I can't wait to see what they do next. I just give me more Ratchet and Clank, give me more Spider-Man, and for the love of God, give me Sunset Overdrive 2. Please, give it to me, please.
Well, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I guess whatever it is, I'll play it. I don't care if it's new IP, current IP, whatever. I don't care. I'm gonna play it. I know you will too. But Anyka, thank you so much. This was a blast talking about this game. I've been dying to talk to someone about this game, and I would have Twitter exchanges with people, but getting a deep dive with someone, it's just like, man, it's such a release, like when you beat a game like this and you get to finally deep dive talk to someone. But thank you so much. It was so much fun.
Yeah, thank you.
And for listeners, you can check us out every Thursday on podcast services and on YouTube at KeenGamer. Just look it up on YouTube. You can easily find us. There's not much else that's going to be named KeenGamer anyways. So until then, see you next time. Thank you.